Welcome, everyone. This professional development course is called Creating Gallery Walks for Social Studies with Higher Depth of Knowledge. I'm going to go ahead and start presenting my screen so that you can follow along. Again, today we're going to be talking about creating gallery walks for a social studies or history classroom, and we're going to talk about how this will increase the depth of knowledge. My name is Wesley Glosson. And starting with that, I'd like to introduce myself. So I live in the state of Georgia and have my entire life. I live around the Athens, Atlanta area. If you're not familiar with Athens, I always say we're about an hour out from Atlanta. It's actually where the Georgia Bulldogs play. I like cooking on my spare time. That's one of my hobbies. This is actually some shrimp and grits, a Southern cuisine that we enjoy quite a lot down here. And my family and I take cooking classes, and we just really enjoy de-stressing in the kitchen and also, of course, eating what we cook. Another thing that I like to do in my spare time to burn off some of those calories is play tennis with a few of my friends. We like to play tennis lessons or take tennis lessons and use the ball machine, really get a good sweat. I just love the game. It takes a lot of skill, more skill than people might think, and it's just a lot of fun. I also like to travel, and this is a picture of me maybe a couple years ago at the Grand Canyon. I have a goal to get to all 50 states within the next few years, so that's when I checked Arizona off my list. So that's a little bit about my personal life. Now I'd like to tell you about my professional life as an educator. I actually taught in the classroom for about 7 years, and I taught 3rd grade, 5th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in almost every subject. Social studies being one of the main ones, also reading and English, math, and science. So all of the core subjects I taught in those 7 years at the elementary and middle school level. I taught in a STEAM school or STEM, and so I have a good amount of experience with that as well. Inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, and that was a very unique experience. And but mostly I would say that one of my expertise is teaching social studies and history. So this is actually a picture from the African American New Museum. It was very new at the time in Washington, D.C., the Smithsonian. And I like to take pictures like this when I go and experience history in this way and show my students in the classroom. So that's a little bit about my personal and professional life. And so welcome to this professional development. So every state is different, but I am fairly sure that everyone has at least heard of the term DOK or depth of knowledge. And why I am reviewing this now is because this gallery walk that we're talking about really helps us reach a higher depth of knowledge. Now, I know there are researchers out there and educators out there that say, literally, they say burn depth of knowledge out of your mind. It's awful, it's terrible. I don't know all the reasons why, but I had a lot of good effects with it when I thought about what is the depth of knowledge that I'm teaching my students. So let's review this really quickly. And if it's totally new to you, maybe you want to take an entire course about depth of knowledge because it really is important. You're always going to have your detractors, but like I said, for me, this was really important in my classroom and I had good results with it. So depth of knowledge was developed really with 4 levels. And if I was always taught that if we teach to level 1, then we are going to get very little retention. Our students are going to retain very little. So if they are only working on things like identify or memorize or list or recognize, then those kind of things kind of get erased out of our memory pretty fast, right? And so we really might start at level 1, depth of knowledge. That might be where we introduce a new skill or new subject, but we want to get on around that wheel to levels 2, 3, and certainly 4 is a very high goal. So depth of knowledge. Now let's look at 3 and 4. So if I'm giving my students an assignment that's kind of making them think deeper, I might have them do something like compare. Because, when you have to compare the 1700s to the 1800s, you have to learn a lot about the 1700s and the 1800s to be able to compare and contrast them, right? So instead of just saying describe the 1700s in American history, which would be more like a level 1, because you would just have to regurgitate a lot of facts, you might say compare and contrast the 2 centuries. And that way students are going to have to learn the facts and then really think deep to find what was similar or dissimilar about the 2 centuries. I just thought of that example off the top of my head. It might not have been the best one, but that is what you find in a level 3 is compare. Or even you can ask them to draw a conclusion. So if they read the Emancipation Proclamation, for example, then you can ask them to draw a conclusion. What do you conclude white Southerners thought about the Emancipation? What do you conclude slaves would have thought, right? So that's a level 3. They have to really think strategically. Now, what we're going to talk about today with gallery walk kind of straddles that line between level 3 and 4. So level 4 is really where you have to, something is going to be produced. They're going to create something. But to do that, they're going to have to really think deep and do all of those things in 1, 2, and 3. They're going to have to, identify, and they're going to have to draw some inferences, which is a level 2. They're going to have to maybe summarize, and they're going to have to assess. But they're going to have to put all those things together to reach a level 4. So a level 4 assignment is really, really higher thinking. But it's when we get our students to start critiquing. So now you're not asking them, what did white Southerners think about the Emancipation Proclamation? But what do you think? And use facts to develop your argument. So that's more level 4. Or rewrite the Emancipation Proclamation in a way that it would be even more beneficial to slaves. That's really deep thinking, because you're going to have to know what was already said, what it already did, and then what's going to make it more beneficial. All right. So that's just a little quick review of the depth of knowledge. Again, the gallery walk might not get us to that level 4, but it's definitely going to get us at least to that level 3, and somewhat in level 4, because they are going to have to apply concepts. They are going to have to analyze really deeply some of the things that they're going to see in the gallery walk. So how would you prepare for a gallery walk? Well, we always start with our standard. I understand that your standard will be different from whatever state or district you're coming from, but this is the gallery walk standard that so if I'm looking at how am I going to produce a lesson on social studies, 8th grade history standard number 6, SS 8H6. That's a Georgia standard of excellence. And so let's read it. Analyze the impact of Reconstruction on Georgia and on other southern states. Emphasize the Freedmen's Bureau, sharecropping and tenant farming, Reconstruction plans, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to the Constitution, Henry McNeill Turner and other Black legislators, and the Ku Klux Klan. So that's the standard. Now, the interesting thing about a gallery walk is you can do it as an introduction activity where the students know very little about this, or you can do it as a concluding activity after they've learned to kind of add a little bit more. You're going to see why you can use a gallery walk at the beginning or at the end of teaching a standard, or anywhere in between. So my gallery walk will not cover every piece of this standard, but what my gallery walk is going to cover are especially the things that I know students might have very little knowledge over. Okay. So my gallery walk today will cover Freedmen's Bureau, Reconstruction, because that term is very broad, Reconstruction. So we're going to find something that really kind of breaks that down and make them think, what is Reconstruction in America? So let me go ahead and give you an example. So this gallery walk will have 4 exhibits. You can have more, you can have less. So basically the way it works is all around the classroom, I'm going to hang exhibit A on one wall, exhibit B on another wall, exhibit C on a third wall, and exhibit 4 on a fourth wall, or D. Now, again, this is a simplistic gallery walk. We're going to talk later how you can make it even more integrate technology and things like that. So take a good look. This is exhibit A. So I found a primary source document, which is a newspaper ad or article about the Freedmen's Bureau. This is from a Southern secessionist standpoint, but it's really eye-catching. So when students get to this station, they're going to say, what is this all about? Why is there a huge monkey on the front? And so they're going to read it. They're going to do 3 things at each station. They're going to read and look. They're going to discuss amongst each other, and then they're going to answer separately on their piece of paper the questions associated with the gallery walk. So one of the questions on here is describe the feelings and opinions of the person who created this advertisement. So that's a higher DOK. So they're not just saying, what do you see here? You have to synthesize this and understand what the person who created this, what must their feelings be? What must their belief system be? Number 2, who does the advertisement suggest will be cheated if the Freedmen's Bureau passes Congress? So again, that's pretty deep level, because the advertisement doesn't say white people will be cheated. They have to kind of figure that out based on everything they see. What image represents blacks in the advertisement? Now that's more of a DLK level, maybe 2. And of course, that would be the racist image of the monkey there. So I do mix the questions between DO level 1, 2, and 3. Some of my questions are easier. You might ask a question that says, tell me 3 things that stand out to you in this picture. That's just identify. That's DOK level 1. Okay, so there's my exhibit A. This is hitting that reconstruction part of the gallery walk. Exhibit B is a graphic that I found that explains what sharecropping is like. So students would stand here when they get to this exhibit and look at this exhibit, and it would pretty much explain how sharecropping works, because that's a concept that most 8th graders might not know. So number 1, who does all the hard work in the system? And hopefully they will see that the sharecroppers doing all the hard work, that the landowner is not doing much at all. Number 2, who makes most of the money? And you can infer that or gather that from the image. Number 3, why is this fair or unfair to sharecroppers? So there they have to make a decision. Is this a fair system? Is this unfair? But that $10 word, why? Why? If you think it's unfair, explain. Okay. All right. So exhibit C is a picture of that famous Freedmen's Bureau agent, that advertisement. There are words with this one that they can read, but also the pictures. What I love about Gallery Walk is for our students that are maybe in the 8th grade, and I had some students that were on a 2nd grade reading level, but they can always look at the pictures, and they're in a group. So they can't read it, but there's somebody in the group that's explaining what it says, and they're using. So it's just an excellent tool for even our lower learners that struggle a little bit more as well. So the questions here, you can read those. Notice this 3rd question, you cannot answer from the picture. It's in the article. Which president first wanted to create this agency? And then our last picture graphic. I actually used 2 on Exhibit D. And very simple questions. Why does the South need to be reconstructed? Students understand this immediately. They look at the picture, they see it, because something needs to be rebuilt. The South was destroyed, or the country was destroyed. There was a war. Number 2, what were some challenges during Reconstruction? And that's going to come from that second graphic as well. So these images were found quickly on online libraries, on Galileo, which is a online database that we have here in Georgia. But you can take pictures out of your textbook and post them. You can use memes or GIFs that get your standard across, whatever standard you are trying to teach. Now, paired with this, so I'm going to print this out and put it across the room. Color is best because everybody likes to look at color images. So if you can find some color images, that's always fun for the students. And pair with that, I'm going to make an answer sheet for them. So when they get to Exhibit A, they know there's 3 questions I have to answer. Because some exhibits might only have 2 questions, like Exhibit D here. So each student will have this, and they're going to put their name at the top and answer these questions. All right, so that's how it works. This is the part of the assignment where students take responsibility, where they have something to prove. Look, I participated. Some answers will be very elaborate, of course. Some answers will be not as elaborate. But this isn't really an assessment, or at least a summative assessment. This is more maybe a formative activity. You could certainly make it a summative activity as well, assessment. So students love this. Why? Because they get up and they're walking around the classroom. That's a very simple thing that students want to do. They just want to get up and walk sometimes. They get out of their seats. Students also enjoy this because they're with their friends. They're in small groups. So the way I would assign students is I would go group 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'd say all of group 1, you started at Exhibit A. Group 2, you started at Exhibit B. And so then they're in their little stations, and our gallery walk begins. This is how it works. You print the exhibits out and place them all around the room, staple them or tape them on the boards, on the walls. You print their answer sheets and distribute them. Make sure that you let students know that everybody's not starting at Exhibit A, because what will happen is students will be at Exhibit D for their start, but they'll put their answers for Exhibit A, and then they'll try to have to erase, and it's just going to mess everything up. So make sure that they're answering the questions on the exhibit that they start at, that they are currently at. Number 3, lay out your procedures very clearly and be very repetitive. Now, the great thing about a gallery walk is after you do it the first time, everybody remembers how to do it, and they can do it in a matter of seconds, get set up for it. But when you're first doing it, it's just a little time consuming to kind of explain it all out, but it's very, very important. I tell the students that we're going to use a 2 by 2 by 2 rule. You're going to have 2 minutes to look at the exhibit. Any longer than that, and they get bored and they start fidgeting and talking. But I tell them no talking during the 2 minutes of looking. I tell them some exhibits will have pictures, some will only have words, some will have a mixture, but 2 minutes. And you have to look at it the entire 2 minutes. Look for things that you didn't notice in the first minute or minute and a half, but keep looking. Reread it. I always tell them it's okay to reread. The second 2 minutes, they're going to talk amongst each other. What stood out? They're going to talk about something that they didn't understand. I always tell them things that's good to discuss. I say, guys, discuss what confused you. Talk about what really stood out to you. Talk about what you feel and think. Because sometimes, even though our students are chatty Cathys, they don't know what to talk about when it comes to academics. So help them along with that. And then I told them that the last 2 minutes is to write their answers. Now, 2-2-2 was my rule. If you're teaching older students, they might be writing a lot more, or they might be observing a lot more. So it might be a 3-3-3 rule. You could even, I think one time I even did a 2-2-4 rule. I had writers that everybody was saying, I don't have enough time to write my answers. So I said, okay, we're doing a 2-2-4 rule. All right. But just make sure that they understand that we are moving along, and they love that every 2 minutes they're doing something different. So that's really important. Make sure that you tell them that you have to stay at your exhibit. If you're at A, you stay at A. Don't be talking to people in exhibit B, and so on and so forth. Stay in the physical space. Also, make sure that you reiterate that it's important for everyone to participate. Now, I don't enforce this with the iron fist. Some students are going to be quieter and just listen, maybe because of their academic abilities even. They need to do more listening, but I encourage participation very heavily. Another one of the procedures is, again, we already went over this, place them at their first exhibit. We're not moving 20 students together. That's impossible in most classrooms. And then you start your gallery walk. All right, so we're almost done here, but let's talk about some tips for success. Number one, be really clear about what you want. We just went over that, but be very, very clear about how this works. Number two, use a timer. They want to hear that bell go off. Ding. And say, okay, that's our 2 minutes of looking. Now it's time to do our 2 minutes of talking. I'm setting the timer, and you set the timer. Sometimes before I set the timer for the next 2 minutes, I praise them or redirect them and say, all right, guys, that last 2 minutes, I saw people looking off in space. You weren't using your 2 minutes to look at the exhibit. So that's important as well. Number three, you walk around the classroom and facilitate, especially the first time. I didn't walk around the whole time. That's the beauty part of this. But you want your students to be facilitating this activity, this learning. So I'm not walking around all in their face the whole time, but I am walking around because they say, oh, here comes Mr. Glosson. We better make sure we're on task. So that always helps. That's just a good classroom management tip. But also you can get those, you'll be surprised at the depth of discussion that you hear, but also you can increase the depth when it needs to be increased. Or say, did anybody notice this? What do y'all think about this? Number four, remember your students that need assistance. This can be done with a SPED population. You can put, I used to put my parapro, my teacher's aide, with the group that had the SPED students. I wouldn't put all the SPED students in one group because we never want to identify them like that, but I might put two over here with two regular ed students, and I might be with the parapro, and then two others might be in this group. One might be higher functioning and he doesn't really need me or the teacher's aide. So you can really craft this to your students' needs. You certainly can. But remember them because they do perhaps, or even your English language learners. You might need to float with them or bounce in with them and bounce out. You don't want to be with them the whole time. You also have to be flexible, but I have the picture of the yoga lady doing yoga here. I don't know what pose that is, but teachers always have to be flexible. Remember when I said I went from the 2-2-2 rule to the 2-2-4? I did that in the middle of the lesson because everybody was saying, I don't have enough time. So I'm not going to say, oh, well, but I changed it right there. So you can be flexible with the time. Also with the format. Sometimes I had a class where I was like, there's no way you guys can handle this. Sorry. Or I would say you guys couldn't handle it. So next time we're not getting up out of our seats. And so what I did was I just scrolled through the exhibits and we did it as a class. On exhibit A, I said, all right, class, this is your 2 minutes to look. It was up on the smart board. And I said, okay, class, this is your 2 minutes to talk. And then I facilitated the conversation. So you can even be flexible with the format. Maybe getting up and moving around the room doesn't work with everyone. At one time, our printer was broke and I couldn't print them out and put them all around the classroom, so I used the smart board. You could even use Classroom Google, and they can do this individually, sitting at their seat. They can open up the gallery walk and answer the questions digitally. So keep that in mind as well. You could also use for your exhibit, instead of something being printed out on paper, if you have an arrowhead because you're doing Native Americans, or you have some maize, corn, um, think of questions for that. You could do a video. If it's a 2-minute little, history.com has some 2-minute videos, maybe explaining who Frederick Douglass was, or who Abraham Lincoln was, or George Washington. And when the group gets there, they press the video and they watch that for 2 minutes. I had to have them out in the hall because everybody else was quiet and the video was kind of loud, but you can move that exhibit into the hallway. They love that diversity. And you're reaching those different type of learners, those audio learners. So that's another idea. Use videos or artifacts. And number 7, I always collect the papers at the end and then go through the exhibit together. I would walk around the classroom. I'd put the students back in their seats and I'd say, okay, what did you guys like about exhibit A? And I would go over the questions, and that was my time to correct any misconceptions and to make sure they really got what they needed to learn from the standard. That was very important, because remember, this is pretty much a self-facilitated lesson. And so I need to make sure that I can answer any questions and correct any misconceptions. All right, guys, I told you I'm almost done, and I really am. So I know you're going crazy with ideas and your applause. This was, of course, not my idea. I learned this in a professional learning myself, and I'll say perfected it and added my own spin to it. And I hope that you guys can use this information. And more importantly, I hope that you can share it with someone. And please go to teachthisteacher.com to see what other great tips and advice other teachers have on our website. Thanks, everyone. And this was a sample of a lesson. Of course, if you took a live course, it would be much more interactive. But we just want to show you the expertise of all of our teachers. Thanks, everyone.